In 1932, Frank Mars is on top of the world, owner of one of the most successful candy companies in the nation. And making success even sweeter is having his son working by his side. But Forrest Mars' hunger to knock Hershey from the top spot gives rise to a power struggle.
You want to win, you have to start thinking bigger.
Tensions that soon boil over.
I want 30%.
Of what?
Of this company? Yes or no? If I leave, I'm not coming back.
When Forrest Mars makes a power grab, and his father's decision will change the face of the American candy industry. In 1905, a 22-year-old entrepreneur with a wife and baby to support is working around the clock to try and fulfill a childhood dream, operating his own small penny candy business. His name is Franklin Mars.
Franklin Mars learned the art and craft of candy making from his mother as a way to pass time. He suffered from polio as a child, and he wasn't allowed to be outside, playing with friends.
The hours spent helping his mother spark a passion in Mars that stays with him.
He grew very interested in candy production, and as an adult, he decided that that was a career he wanted to pursue.
At the time, America's candy business consists mostly of small, local operations, like Mars's, with one major exception: Hershey.
Milton Hershey is kind of this giant figure in American food history because throughout most of American history, chocolate was actually drunk, not eaten. It's not until the latter 19th century into the turn of the 20th century that people are eating chocolate bars on a regular basis. Hershey really develops the American chocolate industry through his techniques for producing chocolate for eating.
Milton Hershey's iconic milk chocolate Hershey bar has made him the candy industry's undisputed king, with annual sales in excess of 35 million in today's dollars, and climbing. And soon, his state-of-the-art factory in Pennsylvania will be producing an even more popular product: small, foil-wrapped milk chocolate Hershey's Kisses. Though he dreams of one day having success on the same level as Hershey, Frank's penny candy business is constantly on the brink of collapse.
Here's the new key.
I don't know where I'm gonna put all this stuff. There's not a single closet, pantry, storage space in this apartment.
And despite the long hours he puts in to try and make sales, he struggles to earn enough to keep a roof over his family's head. And his absence, coupled with the financial insecurity, puts a strain on his marriage.
We have a baby, and this apartment is even smaller than the last. I don't need a mansion with a view. I would just like a nice place to call home.
This is our home. So, we have to count every penny. We've discussed this so many times.
You've discussed it. Will you get the baby?
I just got home.
Oh, goodness, okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Frank Mars was a guy who was willing to do whatever it took to succeed, but he did so at the cost of his family.
By 1910, Frank's wife has had enough. She divorces him for non-support, gaining full custody of their now 5-year-old son, Forrest.
She left the marriage at a time when that was not easy to do. And she knew Frank was just not going to care for them in the way they needed to be. And she did the things she needed to do.
Soon after, Frank's penny candy company goes bankrupt, leaving him unable to pay child support. Struggling to make ends meet as a department store clerk, his ex-wife reluctantly sends their son Forrest to live with her parents in Saskatchewan, Canada.
There's just not a lot of money, and there's a lot of worry. Forrest's mother knew that he'd be in a safer and better environment with her parents.
But even with both his business and family in ruins, Frank Mars refuses to give up on his dream. He remarries, and over the next decade, starts 2 more small candy companies. But competition with more established brands in the area and the high cost of sugar proved too great an obstacle to overcome, and each end up like his first, bankrupt.
He lost everything. But this guy was not giving up. He was going to find a success. So he ran away from his debts and his failure. And he's like, I think this time I'm going to do it.
Down to his last $400, Frank risks it all to start yet another new candy company. But this time, he comes up with a creation that catches on and soon becomes a local hit. A chocolate-covered whipped cream candy he calls the Morrow Bar, which racks up sales of nearly $100,000 per year. Mars's local success in Minnesota is due in large part to a growing trend in candy consumption across the country. After the end of World War I, soldiers who got Hershey's milk chocolate as part of their battlefield rations came home craving the comfort of the candy bar.
Americans are eating more sugar than ever. Sugar is cheaper and more available than ever. And also, people's lives are speeding up. It's the roaring 20s. People are working longer hours, right? They are interested in snacks and quick lunches. And a lot of candy bars at that time were marketed as a lunch substitute, which is kind of crazy to think about today.
But now, in his 40s, having put his past failures behind him, a reminder of Frank Mars's greatest loss is about to re-enter his life. In 1923, in Chicago, his son, Forrest Mars, now a college student, is working a summer job, hanging cigarette ads to help pay for school, but breaking the law in the process. Frank receives a phone call from the son he hasn't seen in years and travels hundreds of miles to bail him out.
You gotta imagine that situation must have been sort of awkward, right? Here's a father and son that haven't seen one another in a long period of time, and what do they say?
You're welcome.
But it really created this opportunity, in Forrest reaching out to Frank, it created an opportunity for them to reconnect.
neither one of them really wanted to discuss the past. These were not men who were going to work out their issues, but one thing they did talk about was business. This was a commonality they had.
So how come I haven't seen any of your stuff in Chicago?
Well, different markets, different tastes.
Yeah, sure, because nobody eats Hershey bars in California, right? I mean, take these malts. People drink these across the country. So why don't you just make a chocolate bar that tastes like a malted milkshake? No, I'm serious.
So Forrest is like, listen, you ought to put that flavor into a chocolate bar. Or no one was doing that. And soon enough, Frank Mars comes back and he's got a malted milk bar.
Inspired by Forrest's suggestion, Frank Mars challenges his confectioners to figure out a way to create a malted milkshake in candy bar form.
That's a keeper. Spot on.
The new candy bar's secret weapon is something called nougat.
Nougat. This was a relatively new process. So you're beating egg whites and corn syrup together and incorporating air. And it makes a pretty shelf-stable, slightly chewy, but soft and creamy candy that people just love.
From the moment he tastes the malt-flavored nougat and caramel, covered in milk chocolate, Frank Mars knows he has something special. In tribute to its milkshake flavor and his celestial last name, he calls the new creation Milky Way. And he believes it could catapult his company beyond the local market. But to do that, he's going to need help from Hershey. And after meeting with Hershey executives, Mars receives a line of credit to purchase Hershey's chocolate. And Milky Way begins production.
Hershey was actually supplying milk chocolate to a lot of competitors. They were supplying milk chocolate to Mars. They were supplying at different points to Nestle. They supplied milk chocolate to Nabisco for Oreo cookies.
Just weeks after the Milky Way bar enters the market, Mars knows he has a hit. With bars flying off the shelves throughout the Midwest. Soon, he's distributing Milky Way nationwide. And the profits roll in. In its first year on the market, Milky Way amasses $800,000 in sales, the equivalent of $15 million today. And while the high-quality Hershey milk chocolate helps, Milky Way's real secret to success is the fluffy malt-flavored nougat, giving the bar its chocolate malt essence and making the customer feel like they're getting a great deal.
Frank really incorporated a lot of air into his nougat, causing it to become very lofty. The original Milky Way, compared to a Hershey's bar, would have looked 3 or 4 times larger.
After 3 years, Milky Way's continued success convinces Frank Mars to expand, building a factory and corporate headquarters just outside Chicago. There, with direct access to more railroads, distribution becomes more efficient. And even as the stock market crash of 1929 plunges the nation into economic depression, at Mars, the profits roll in. With $25 million in sales in 1930 alone, the modern-day equivalent of almost $500 million.
For candy companies in general, the Depression was actually quite profitable. Candy bars were fairly inexpensive. We didn't have quite the same nutrition science understandings that we do today.
Because meat was so expensive, because food was so expensive, the nickel bar chocolate bar became an occasional meal replacement.
With demand increasing, in 1930, the company introduces the peanut and peanut butter nougat-filled Snickers bar, named after Frank's wife Ethel's favorite racehorse. And in 1932, Three Musketeers debuts, containing 3 individual chocolate-coated bars filled with chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla nougat.
What makes Mars unique is Snickers, Milky Way, Three Musketeers. The bulk ingredient in them all is nougat. And nougat is relatively inexpensive to produce.
For Frank Mars, going from 3 bankruptcies to having 3 top-selling candy bars is a dream come true, and one he is happy to be sharing with his son. After reuniting, Frank puts Forrest through college as he transfers to Yale University, where he graduates with honors in industrial engineering. Newly married, he has returned to Chicago hoping to use what he's learned to help the company grow and challenge Hershey for candy bar supremacy. But over the next 2 years, Forrest's ambitions create a growing tension between him and his father.
Forrest Mars is a salaried employee at Frank's factory. What he wanted, though, was the power to push the envelope. And that was not being given to him.
I got you a little something. It's my way of saying I'm proud of you. Look around. This is everything I've ever wanted, and you are a part of it.
You're acting like we've won, and we're not even in the game yet. You want to win? You have to start thinking bigger. Hershey isn't our supplier. They're a competition.
They were very different people. They had very different backgrounds, and they had very different motivation. And Forrest really saw Franklin as somebody who didn't have the structure for his company to be a legacy company.
Now, Frank and Forrest Mars' different visions of what success means are driving them apart and pushing Forrest to the edge.
I want 30%.
Of what?
Of this company. I've earned it.
Forrest, this is my company.
30% or I walk out that door.
Don't.
Yes or no? If I leave, I'm not coming back.
I'm sorry.
Forrest really wanted to be a partner, but also he wasn't satisfied with just the candy business. He saw something entirely different. He saw something bigger, he saw something global. And Franklin wasn't interested.
Since reuniting, Frank Mars has believed he would one day pass his company on to Forrest. But now, the estranged son with whom he had rebuilt a bond through business is determined to follow his dreams and break away. In 1932, Forrest Mars moves across the Atlantic with his wife Audrey and their 1-year-old son, Forrest Jr., and sets out to learn as much about candy making as he can from the biggest chocolate companies in Europe.
So Forrest Mars has this ambition to become a chocolate entrepreneur and to start building his empire. So what he does is he starts applying for jobs like on the factory floors of other chocolate manufacturers.
Forrest lands jobs at Switzerland's Nestle and Toblerone, concealing his true identity.
He was essentially spying on legacy chocolate companies, and they don't know that Forrest Mars comes from the Mars in the US. They need workers. They happily give him a job, and he learns the ins and outs of the business, how they manufacture chocolate, how they use that chocolate as an ingredient to build out a portfolio of sweets that made them and their brands popular all over Europe.
Using his newly acquired knowledge, Forrest settles with his family in England in 1933, where despite the acrimonious split the year before, Frank, not wanting to abandon his son a second time, offers to help Forrest start his business.
Frank Mars offers him $50,000, and he offers him the European rights to the Milky Way.
Accepting his father's help, Forrest sets up a small candy bar factory in the town of Slough, just outside London, and, using Cadbury chocolate, starts producing a European version of the Milky Way he calls the Mars Bar. Forrest's single-minded determination to succeed means there is little time left for his family.
Forrest was not a work-life balance guy. Everything went back into the business. He wasn't taking weekends off. He wasn't spending time with his family. Forrest just didn't care.
When the Mars Bar finally hits the market, Forrest believes all the long hours will have been worth it. And after its British debut, the thick, nougat-filled Mars Bar is an instant success, selling over 2 million bars in its first year on the market. With that success, Forrest believes he has shown what he is capable of when he's calling the shots, and is convinced his father will now see the error of his ways and hand the reins of his company to his son. But tragically, that day will never come. On April 8, 1934, Frank Mars suffers a heart attack and dies at the age of 51. "4,000 miles and an ocean away, Forrest receives the shocking news.
The story goes that Forrest found out about his father's death after the funeral. It's very impersonal. No one called him. No one sent a telegram. That's pretty rough.
Frank leaves an estate worth over $3 million, $70 million in today's money. And though he wills a portion of Mars' shares to Forrest, he leaves control of the company to his second wife, Ethel, who had worked by Frank's side when the business first got off the ground, but who had no desire to be in charge of day-to-day operations.
Frank's second wife, Ethel, she wasn't interested in being a chocolate factory executive, but she was dedicated to the idea of what her husband had built and keeping it alive and keeping the name and keeping things running the way they had been.
And while Forrest believes he has proven he should be the one to take the reins, Ethel names her half-brother, Mars executive William Krupenbacher, as company president.
Krupenbacher had been working at the company for a while, and he knew the business, and he seemed to be keeping the ship pretty steady.
Forrest Mars sees the choice as a slap in the face and motivation to one day claim what he believes is rightfully his. Determined to grow his business even more, Forrest creates a crunchy chocolate-covered malted milk ball called Maltesers, and it flies off the shelves. Then, looking to diversify, he acquires a canned dog food brand called Chappie.
Forrest was always looking for other opportunities. He wasn't satisfied. He wasn't like his father. He wasn't satisfied to just have one success. And when he saw this dog food, this canned dog food, he said, you know what? I think I can turn this into something.
Mars promotes the food as a nutritious alternative to the table scraps most people feed their dogs. And with no real competition, sales take off, quintupling over the next 5 years. Just as his candy business is becoming Britain's third largest. But in late 1939, with the specter of war in Europe looming, Forrest fears for the safety of his family, which has grown with the birth of John Mars 4 years before, and newborn daughter, Jacqueline, in October. He hands over management of his companies to British associates, and after 7 years abroad, returns to America with his family, armed with an idea he believes will make his company even bigger.
There's another company called Roundtree that had developed something called the Smartie. Chocolate on the inside coated in sugar, a hardened sugar shell. Those were super popular in the UK, and Forrest has an idea.
Convinced that Americans will love a convenient, colorful candy like this, he travels to Pennsylvania to make a pitch to Hershey's president, William Murray. But Murray
How can I help you today, Forrest?
is skeptical.
Look at these.
Colorful. So what?
So they've been in my pocket since I left New York.
These are chocolate. How is that possible?
No, wait. You don't want my pocket candy. Try this.
Forrest Mars is bringing something that's not yet made in the United States to the one company who can help him make it. He doesn't go to the company that his father started. He goes to Hershey.
It's impressive.
Now, you know better than anyone else how much money this can mean. For a 20% investment and your guarantee of a steady supply of Hershey's chocolate. Bruce, your son, he's the executive vice president of my new company.
Forrest's hope is that with no ownership stake in Hershey, Murray will see this as the only opportunity to create a legacy for his son.
I think Bruce would go for it.
Mars and Murray. That has a ring to it.
I like it too.
Enjoy those.
William Murray wants his son to continue his legacy, his candy legacy, and he sees an amazing opportunity. And anybody who knows anything about candy history knows that this is a pivotal moment.
With a deal in place with William Murray, the candy-coated chocolates Forrest Mars will soon introduce to America now have a name: M&Ms. Soon, in downtown Newark, New Jersey, Forrest Mars has a factory up and running, transforming tons of bite-sized milk chocolate pellets into a cascade of his candy-coated M&Ms. But not one of these candies will be available to the American public. Because once again, America is at war. And Forrest Mars has negotiated an exclusive contract with the US military to supply the nation's troops with M&Ms.
Chocolate bars had been around for years by then, and M&Ms were this new kind of poppable, transportable, non-melting food.
It was sort of genius to introduce the M&M to American soldiers who loved the idea of something from home, loved the idea of something sweet. Forrest knew soldiers would love them and want them when they came home from Europe.
With wartime rationing in effect, Forrest's partnership with Bruce Murray ensures they'll have priority access to chocolate from Hershey.
Because William Murray wanted his son to succeed, they never got their chocolate supplies interrupted.
Okay, just let me know where to send it.
They were first on the list from Hershey. Hershey looked out for the M&Ms company.
But M&Ms aren't the only product Forrest is selling to the military.
Army food is no longer a matter of guesswork. Since the last war, nutrition has become a science. Food correctly used means fighting strength for our soldiers and better health for civilians.
Just as he had diversified into canned dog food in England, Forrest forms a partnership with a food scientist he met in London to produce a product called converted rice.
A German chemist named Erich Husenlaub created a way to make rice easier to store and also easier to cook. It's basically partially cooking the rice so that it has a hard, shiny exterior. And it's more shelf-stable because the weevils can't get into it. But because it's already partially cooked, it's much easier and faster to cook.
With the U.S. at war, Forrest sees the product's potential for keeping the troops fed on the battlefield.
Forrest invests, and they build a plant in Texas and are able to crank out millions of tons of converted rice for the U.S. government for military consumption in World War II.
Forrest brands it Uncle Ben's converted rice. When the war ends, he begins selling it, along with M&Ms, to the American public. And with hundreds of thousands of returning soldiers singing each product's praises, sales skyrocket, catapulting Forrest to a level of success beyond his wildest dreams. Now every bit as successful as Frank Mars had been, Forrest is determined to finally stake his claim to his father's business. And when Ethel Mars dies at the age of 61, he believes that time has come.
Ethel passes away, and based on Frank's original will, half of her shares now go to Forrest. And so Forrest now has a nice stack of Mars shares, and he also gets a seat on the board.
But now, blocking Forrest's way is his half-sister, Patricia, who is determined to honor her mother's wishes. And, along with company president William Krupenbacher, keep Forrest from seizing control.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you. I understand that you have some requests.
Yes, I think it's time I got to look at the books. You have been boxing me out of this company for years, and I think it's about time you treated me as an asset and not an enemy.
Well, you have to admit you've been a little antagonistic. The board is terrified of you. You're the one that comes in here every time and tries to push
enough.
your way.
Just get me the accounting.
Patricia was not interested in the chocolate business, and yet she was deeply loyal to her father, to her mother. She was not a friend of Forrest, and he tried to convince her to sell him her shares of the company. She was not interested in doing that out of loyalty.
Though Forrest is determined to win enough seats on the board to gain control of his father's company, it doesn't distract him from continuing to build his own business. Over the next several years, Forrest's company, known as Food Manufacturers, is continuing to grow exponentially as he sinks millions into advertising to boost sales even further. By the end of the 1950s, it boasts sales of $200 million, the modern-day equivalent of $2.1 billion. 4 times more than Mars. But even though his own company now dwarfs the one founded by his father, his drive to take it over is as strong as ever. And then, in 1959, when William Krupenbacher retires, Forrest is poised to take what he believes is rightfully his. But Patricia, who holds the same amount of shares and who has the support of a majority of the board, has other ideas.
Yes, connect me to the board. It's about Forrest.
Determined to keep Forrest from taking over, Patricia moves to name her husband, James Fleming, as the new president and CEO of Mars.
With the retirement of Krupenbacher, Patricia really sets the stage for this next big Mars family battleground.
Thank you for coming, Forrest.
First thing I want to say is that Krupenbacher did a fine job getting this company through some tough times. Didn't do it my way, but he has my respect when it comes to his retirement.
That's surprisingly kind of you, Forrest.
I'm ready to get things started.
Well, my husband, James, and I are looking forward to having your support on the board.
You want to put him in charge? Krupenbacher was a serious businessman.
Well, I'm quite fond of my choice to lead the business into the future.
All right, Patricia. Be sure and call me when your honey here runs this company into the ground.
So at this point, Patricia, with the help of the board, puts her husband, James Fleming, in control of Mars. And Forrest was enraged. He just saw this as an absolute affront to him. It was an insult because he saw Fleming as weak and really didn't know how to do the job. And ultimately, that started to play out.
With little high-level management experience, James Fleming struggles in his new job.
I'm on top of it, Patty. Please, just let me figure it out.
And the company's bottom line begins to suffer.
Fleming, when he saw the profit margins start to change, he was like, okay, I figured out a way to make us money. I'm going to use cheaper ingredients.
In addition to reducing costs of ingredients, Fleming also cuts corners in production.
There was a story where you could see through the coating of the Snickers bar, right? You could start to see the peanuts would show through. And so the product started to suffer, and then sales started to suffer because consumers started to notice. The product quality just fell off the cliff.
By 1964, Mars's revenues have dropped by 20%. And Forrest Mars makes his move.
And Forrest goes to her and says, listen, your husband is driving the company into the ground. I need to save the company. It'll stay in the family. And she agrees to do it. Forrest finally gets full control of Mars.
Finally got what you always wanted.
After a struggle that has lasted for over 2 decades, Forrest merges his company with his father's under the name Mars Incorporated.
Hope it was all worth it.
Though Patricia believes she has done the right thing to preserve her father's legacy, she does not live to see it, losing her life to brain cancer only a year later. With over 80% of the company now under his control, Forrest moves quickly to acquire the remaining 20%, assuming the titles of chairman, president, and CEO. And immediately, life at the Chicago factory built by his father changes forever. Forrest retools the factory with the latest technology and institutes a no-nonsense corporate culture that will treat all workers as equals.
When he came in, everybody got a punch card, including Forrest Mars himself. So these vice presidents, presidents, everybody had to clock in.
Mars also establishes the highest pay scale in the industry. Forrest retools the factory with the latest technology, like Hershey. But along with higher pay come higher expectations.
Forrest Mars was a notoriously difficult person to work with. Huge anger management problems, very demanding, very controlling, and he expected perfection of everyone. And he's working just as hard, if not harder, than everybody else.
But Forrest believes all the hard work will be worth it if he can turn Mars into the #1 candy company in America. And that means severing ties with the company that has supplied Mars's chocolate since the 1920s, Hershey.
He wants to divorce himself from Hershey because they're going to become fierce competitors. He goes to Hershey, he says, listen, we're done.
Producing their own chocolate creates huge upfront costs, but Forrest Mars is thinking long-term, building a vertically integrated candy empire that can knock Hershey from the industry's top spot.
And that's the one thing you see over and over with Forrest. He's always investing back into the company.
And a big part of that long-term investment is readying the next generation to take over. His sons, Forrest Jr. and John.
His idea was he didn't want to raise playboys. He didn't just hand things to his kids. Even M&Ms, his kids, when they were growing up, they weren't given M&Ms. They weren't all, he said we needed them all for the business.
He really wanted his kids to work in the business, just like he had, but he had to work for everything that he got, and he felt like his children needed to do the same.
As high as Forrest's expectations are for his employees, they're even higher when it comes to his children.
Done yet?
No.
A lifelong workaholic, Forrest has been a distant but demanding father. Particularly so with his eldest son, Forrest Jr., who, like his father, is a Yale graduate. But despite the difficulties he and many other employees have working for Forrest Mars, with generous bonuses tied to the company's profits, no one can argue with the results. By 1973, Forrest has led Mars Incorporated to the top, overtaking Hershey to become the largest candy maker in the United States, with Snickers, Milky Way, Three Musketeers, and the Marathon Bar among the nation's top 10 selling candy bars, and M&Ms outselling them all. The company brings in $200 million in domestic candy sales that year, the equivalent of over $6 billion today. Then, having achieved what he set out to do, Forrest Mars walks away, handing over ownership of the privately held company to his 3 children, Forrest Jr., John, and Jacqueline.
So here's what Forrest did differently. At the end of his run, he gave his children each a third of the company, right? They didn't have to fight for it. They didn't have to prove themselves for it. They had, just by the nature of being his children.
Having already worked under their father for several years, Forrest Jr. and John assume control of the company's day-to-day operations, while their sister Jacqueline sits on the board.
So by the time the sons take over the business, it's a multinational, massive company that is still a privately owned business.
Though the fiercely private Mars family make no public statements, with Mars now the nation's largest candy company, Forrest Jr. and John know the world is watching, and they get right to work.
If you look at his sons, if you look at John and Forrest Jr., if you expected them to be delighted that they've inherited a chocolate factory, they didn't see it that way at all. They just saw it as the business they were handed to run. It was all about the company, all about the work. They were raised a certain way, and they lived largely that way as they took over the company and ran it.
Employing their father's no-nonsense management style and maintaining his commitment to remaining privately held. With Forrest Jr. and John at the helm, the company does not miss a beat.
Forrest had built the company up into like an $800 million global enterprise. In the next 20 years or so, his sons, they turn it into a $20 billion business. So not only does it continue to grow, it grows exponentially under their leadership.
Through the ensuing decades, the company continues its stunning growth. Today, headquartered in McLean, Virginia, its global businesses bring in $45 billion in annual sales, making it the nation's third largest privately held company, with many members of the still very private Mars family showing up to work each day.
You know, here's this family-owned company now on the 5th generation. They go in and out of different positions in the company. They're not just board members. They're not just, you know, telling people what to do. They are ingrained in the business in a very different way, but they're very low profile.
Mars' low profile and high profits are the product of a fierce work ethic, instilled by a man determined to prove something to his father and the world, channeling a relentless drive to succeed into a single-minded pursuit of excellence. A pursuit that lives on, continuing to define this extraordinary company, built by a one-of-a-kind family.
Forrest Mars, from the beginning of his life, was always looking for this bigger idea, this bigger picture. The idea of simple success was never enough. He was looking to build dynasties and empires, and he did it. He created a global empire and a family dynasty that exists to this day,